Hello, I'm your host Rich Keeble, here again to sound out the latest noise about acoustics and update you with the buzzing research developments. Take a look at what's coming up.
And I believe now the number of women, the percentage of sort of full members of the Institute who are women is roughly 12%.
Reaching out for every age group. So be a student ambassador, be involved, be role models going into schools. And it doesn't really matter your gender. When you talk about your industry, you can use examples of successful engineers or scientists of all genders.
Well, other previous work have looked at aerogels when they're combined with other materials, when they're used as composites. So my work also looks at them in composite form, but I also focus on the materials when they're in their granular and powder form.
But some of the outcome might be to change the way in which a development is used in certain ways. So the occupants might think that they would change their behaviour, or they might think they would do things to increase wanted sounds, such as sounds of nature, birdsong typically, or wind in trees.
And it started a conversation which has led to where we are today, which is a fabulous space which is made better for those in the experience. And acoustics is central to that.
Having worked for many years or decades in acoustics, and acoustics is so diverse. It covers applications from geoscience to biology to medicine to many, many things.
They need some kind of external contactless force to be able to align them to grow in a more natural way. And if you use acoustic forces, you can force them to grow in that way to create more realistic muscle tissues.
A number of members said to me, we felt more involved with the Institute during lockdown than we have previously.
We have a new innovation strategy from the government recently published, which focuses on transformative technologies and how we can build on the fact that the UK is great at science and to turn that more into economic advantage.
This is the Royal College of Surgeons headquarters buildings, which is located in Lincoln's Inn Field in London.
According to the recent UCAS data provided by HESA, between 2017 and 2018, 39% of students studying physical sciences were female. In the same period, the percentage of female students studying mathematical sciences was just 37%, and only 5% of audio engineers in the UK are women. And this shortage of women spans to other areas of acoustics. To tell us more about the opportunities for women in acoustics is Professor Bridget Shield, recently awarded an NBE. Hello. What do you believe prevents more women from pursuing a career in acoustics?
When I started working in acoustics, which was in the early 1970s, there were very, very few women indeed. And I'd often go to a conference or a meeting and find I was the only woman there. And that could be quite intimidating, quite daunting. It's been encouraging over the years to see a gradual increase in the number of women. And I believe now the number of women, the percentage of sort of full members of the Institute who are women is roughly 12%, which compares quite favourably with some of the other engineering professions. But obviously it's still not nearly enough. Well, as I say, I think it's the general sort of shortage of women going into engineering and taking the relevant subjects, A-levels, for them to enter into an engineering degree or an acoustics degree. I think there is a problem in the acoustics industry with women who start off in acoustics. Talking to the younger women, I think it is difficult for them, particularly those with young families. And in fact, this isn't just true of women, it's true of anybody with young families, with parenting role or any caring role. Something that's very difficult is combining that with the sort of hours required in acoustic and consultancy in particular. I suspect another problem is childcare. When I went back to work after having my children, we relied on au pairs. I mean, childminders and au pairs, and I'm sort of lucky in that we could accommodate an au pair, but I mean, that doesn't happen these days. So I think on the whole, those sort of practical aspects are much more difficult and much more expensive as well than they were in my day. There's also a problem, I think, with women returning to acoustics after having had a break for any reason. I mean, I found it, I had 10 years, not in acoustics, I did sort of other part-time jobs and things, after I'd had my children, before I went back to acoustics. And everything had changed. Instrumentation had changed, terminology had changed, the units that noise was measured in had changed. And I found it very, very difficult to catch up. And I suspect now, possibly, the change is happening even faster. So I think there's a need to make it easier for women to start a career in acoustics and then know that they can pick it up again if they have a break for any reason. I think acoustics in general is very hidden. People aren't aware of it. They're certainly not aware of it as a subject that you could actually study at university. So I think there's a need to sort of promote acoustics, raise awareness of acoustics as in general. But I think one of the things that might make it more attractive and more attractive to women in particular is possibly highlighting the links with other subjects. So you've got links with psychology, the effects of noise on people and how people react to sounds of different kinds, which was really, really interesting, really enjoyable and rewarding work. And the results of that sort of fed into the building regulations on the acoustic design of schools. So it's actually had an impact on in the real world, which is very gratifying.
The lack of women in the sciences also stretches into engineering, and Jennifer Glover has been working on improving diversity in the field. How do you approach this, Jennifer?
So for me, there's really two elements. And firstly, it's about being active. So if it's something you're passionate about, like I am, and you think it's really important, because it is, we know that diverse teams produce the best outcomes, the most effective teams, people are normally happiest in it. So that means reaching out for every age group. So be a student ambassador, be involved, be role models going into schools. And it doesn't really matter your gender. When you talk about your industry, you can use examples of successful engineers or scientists of all genders and any minority group you can think of, and be conscious of that. And that will make an impact from a very early age, because these kind of stereotypes that affect women going into science and engineering start from a very early age. We're talking primary school level. So we have to challenge that at every level, moving through the different stages, trying to actively retain the talent we have in university and further education. And also I think it's particularly important to make sure we retain the women we have in industry and maintain their experience so they can help inform and educate for those women coming forward. So I'm involved with the Women's Engineering Society, which is a national charity, and they help to promote and support women through all stages of their engineering career. And for me, that gives me a real opportunity to try and not only make engineering better for myself as a female engineer, but make it a better industry all round.
Another woman excelling in the field of acoustics is Hasina Begum, who is breaking ground with her aerogel research. Aerogels are among the lightest solid materials known to man and are created by combining a polymer with a solvent to form a gel, and then removing the liquid from the gel and replacing it with air. They are extremely porous, very low in density, and solid to the touch. They are used in the manufacture of chemical products, electronics, thermal and acoustic insulations, energy absorbers, spacesuits, and in building systems. Aerogels also absorb or are used to insulate against sound. To tell us why and how this happens is PhD student Hasina Begum. Hasina, how do aerogels absorb sound, and how is your research different to previous papers?
So the way in which aerogels absorb sound is more to do with their physical properties. Aerogels come in different forms. They can come in monolithic form, granular form, and powdrous form. So the way in which that is quite interesting for acoustical properties is when you start looking at the particle size, when you start looking at the pore size, things like compaction and volume fraction. All these things are really important when it comes to trying to understand the sound absorption of aerogels. In terms of how my research is different to other previous work, well, other previous work have looked at aerogels when they're combined with other materials, when they're used as composites. So my work also looks at them in composite form, but I also focus on the materials when they're in their granular and powder form. So what I do is I make these materials in the lab, and I systematically look at how they are designed. I look at their pore structure, the density, the particle size, and then I validate this with mathematical models, and just so we can try and understand, how this works if we were to use it in industry. And a lot of research doesn't do that. So that's what makes my research quite novel, really, is the fact that I'm combining the experimental and the mathematical side of things, and then doing everything quite systematically and using aerogel in its pure form.
Jack Harvey-Clark has been researching improving residential noise impact assessment by using soundscapes. He's here to tell us about it. Hi Jack, tell us about your research.
I wouldn't use the term soundscapes as such. I would use the term soundscape approach to design. And this is fundamentally different from a traditional acoustic design approach because it starts with the perception of people of the acoustic environment in a particular context. So what's important for those people in that context, and then addresses those issues. So a traditional design approach uses sound level meters to measure the decibels, and then we have design aspirations based on noise levels in particular spaces, so in a residential accommodation, for example. If we take a soundscape approach to this problem, we present people with the noise environment in a particular context and ask them what they think about it and what would they like from it. So is it suitable or not for the intended uses?
And how does your research inform architects?
So some of the output of a soundscape assessment might be to change the fabric of the proposed development, and that might be to provide additional noise control in certain places. But some of the outcome might be to change the way in which a development is used in certain ways. So the occupants might think that they would change their behaviour, or they might think they would do things to increase wanted sounds, such as sounds of nature, birdsong typically, or wind in trees and things like that, into a space. So they're quite different responses from a noise control approach.
Our team went to the Winchester Science Centre to speak with Peter Rogers about sustainable acoustics and to check out the sound, hearing and vibration exhibition.
So Winchester Science Centre is a very prominent building in the area, and it is a wonderful cathedral of science. And the CEO, Ben Ward, came to talk to me as a local acoustician and ask how we could perhaps improve the experience of visitors in the centre. And it started a conversation which has led to where we are today, which is a fabulous space which is made better for those in the experience. And acoustics is central to that. So sustainable acoustics, combining and smashing together two concepts that really are the future of the way that we really need to be thinking about acoustics. Acoustics is relating to the study of sound and vibration, and sustainability is focusing on using acoustics to make things better for the future generations. So that's the simple idea, and put in a bit more detail, if you consider each of the pillars of sustainability, so people, planet, place, profit, you can then think about many, many ways in terms of how you can use acoustics to achieve that better outcome. Sustainable acoustics is important to me because I first of all think of my children and the fact that I want them to be in a better world, and I want to use what I know in terms of skills to be able to help that happen. And it's wonderful to use acoustics and the knowledge of acoustics to make things better for the next generation, whether it's through school design or whether it's through experiences like this or many things. There's so many ways we can help them.
Well, I'm currently in an ear. We're here at our new exhibition floor. So this is lots of different things to see and do and ways to learn about sound and vibrations, what sound means to us in our daily lives, some of the things that it creates in both land and ocean, man-made and natural sounds. And to do that, of course, you need to start off thinking about the ear. Got an exhibition which is all about sounds underwater. This is a really lovely way of learning about some of the things that happen underneath the ocean. So this is Humphrey the whale, who's lost at sea. So he's been separated from his pod, and it's a really lovely way for kids to learn about how deep sea animals can actually communicate over really long distances, and that's because sound is able to travel so much further and faster underwater. But it also teaches them a little bit about some of the kind of chaotic sounds that are underneath the water because of man-made sounds as well. You know, what better way to learn about how sound bounces around than through the medium of a giant rocket? So do you want to come and we'll have a little look what happens inside the magic of this rocket. So in each of its boosters you've got different sort of games and things that kids can and adults can learn about how sound travels and how they can manipulate it. But inside here we have a very echoey chamber. So here you can learn about why sound is different in cathedrals, or in toilets, or why sound wouldn't travel in space. And then we've got another one of my absolute favourites. We've got a big part here which is all dedicated to music and vibrations in that sense. So if you have a little look here, we've got what we like to imagine is Europe's largest guitar. And this is a really great place for kids and adults to understand the vibrations that we use to make sound. So guitar strings, I'm no musician I'm afraid, so apologies for the out of tune, but basically the length of the strings, the thickness of the strings and the tension of the strings will give you different sounds from our guitar. So the kids can have a play on that, and then if they really fancy it they can come around and sneak inside this giant chamber inside the body of the guitar, and you might notice a difference in the sound if people are in here when the strings are plucked, and they can just really get a feel for those vibrations being amplified inside our giant guitar. I'm going to head back out where it's a little bit lighter, but these are just some of my favourites of our brand new sound exhibition.
To tell us about his innovative research is winner of the 2021 Rayleigh Medal, Professor Michael Vorlander. Hello Michael, what does it mean to you to win such a prestigious award, and what does it mean for the field of acoustics?
This is a very stunning message which I received from the IOA, and I'm very grateful that my little contribution to the big science of acoustics is acknowledged, and that people remember me when it comes to nominations. That this is very kind, and I'm very grateful for everybody who was involved in this decision and nomination process. And of course, for acoustics, it's one of the milestones in a career you can think of. So having a long career in acoustics for many decades and being recognized as a researcher with maybe some significant input, that's extremely that's a very large honor, and extremely I can say I'm very glad. So that's for acoustics. Of course, all these awards which are given by prestigious acoustical organizations are very important in order to motivate young people and early stage researchers to follow the path and to work hard to establish a well-recognized academic record, and then they might have the same opportunity which I just got.
Tell us about your latest groundbreaking research.
Well, my background is physics, and I started my career with my PhD and later in a postdoc projects on working in architectural acoustics. But at that time, in the 1980s and 1990s, the first computers were available for research applications, and I'm talking about desktop computers or personal computers. So it was a phase where many people developed software and algorithms for computational acoustics problems. And my focus was always architecture-related applications, which is concert halls, but also sound insulation in buildings. And with the development of computers and the power of computers, it was possible to add more features to these simulations, which means that we don't simply calculate data and we show numbers, but we can also listen to sounds which were created with computer simulation. This was my main motivation to further advance such models, actually until today. But somehow I left the focus and the narrow focus on architecture, but I also used the same technology for automotive applications or for soundscapes, which means studies on people's perception of sound while walking through a park or an urban area. So it's and also for hearing research, which is also interesting to have more ecologically valid test methods for hearing impaired and such applications. I like to share that acoustics is a wonderful field, and any young person who is just in the undergrad or graduate program, stay with acoustics. You will be very satisfied after having worked for many years or decades in acoustics. And acoustics is so diverse. It covers applications from geoscience to biology to medicine to many, many things, so on. And we can also contribute a lot to what is considered as the global challenges, which is climate change. Everything which affects humans is also including some noise and sound and pollution and all that. So every young student should really consider to start with acoustics. If he or she is in physics or engineering, come to us, and we have a very nice family in acoustics all over the world, and we do very important work.
The Bristol Acoustic Manipulator, or BAM for short, is a new device being developed by the Ultrasonics and NDT group at the University of Bristol. To tell us about this research is Luke Cox. Hello, Luke. Now, what is acoustic manipulation and how do you apply it in your research?
So, acoustic manipulation is essentially using acoustic forces to move small particles, typically small particles. So, when I talk to you, obviously sound creates vibrations, which exerts force on your eardrum, but it also exerts a non-zero force in the direction in which the sound is traveling. So if we control that force, we're able to apply it in more specific ways to be able to move quite delicate and extremely small particles. And the way that we're applying it in my research is we're looking at new techniques in doing that. So it's very easy, for example, to create lots of parallel lines of particles. It's much more difficult to create complex patterns of particles. So that's what we're looking at doing, is using larger numbers of very tiny speakers, usually in water, to be able to control how the particles are patterned in new ways. And that has applications in a wide range of fields. For example, in tissue engineering, you can use acoustic forces to be able to pattern your particles. So if you imagine the tissue in your arm, the muscle cells are aligned, but if you simply place cells into those lines, they won't grow in that way. They need some kind of external contactless force to be able to align them to grow in a more natural way. And if you use acoustic forces, you can force them to grow in that way to create more realistic muscle tissues. Or on the other end of the spectrum, you can do something like smart materials. So if you align microparticles within a smart material, you can make it very strong in one direction and much weaker in another direction, or you can give it conductivity in one way, but not in another way. So you can use that to design your structures more intelligently and to make sure that strength and conductivity and other properties exist in the way that's most useful to the way that you're using them.
It seems to be an exciting time to be working in acoustics. To tell us more about developments in the industry is Stephen Turner, President of the IOA. Hi Stephen, what do you believe are the most exciting developments in the industry right now?
That's a very good question, Rich, and I think from the Institute's perspective, it is a prospect of coming out of the pandemic and getting back to some in-person meetings. We've learnt a lot through COVID and having to do things online. And one of the remarkable things from my perspective as the current president is how a number of members said to me, we felt more involved with the Institute during lockdown than we have previously. And of course, at that point, the penny dropped to realise that, for example, members who live in Northumberland have a 2-hour drive to get to a local branch meeting, which of course is completely impracticable in an evening. And there are other members who live on the Isle of Wight, for example, who can't really catch the ferry to get to an evening meeting in Basingstoke. And so suddenly we found ourselves contacting and being in touch with other members of the Institute whom usually wouldn't have much engagement at all. So our challenge as we come out of the pandemic is how do we have a structure of activities that allows people to meet in person, but also doesn't exclude those for whom in-person meetings are not practical. And of course, we do have some members who are still a little bit nervous about travelling and about engaging with people again. So we have to be mindful to provide offerings that cater for them, as well as those who are dead keen to get back together and meet fellow professionals once more.
Last year, I spoke to Dr. John Lincoln, who has been researching the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the acoustics and phonetics industry. Hello again, John.
One of the most intriguing things as to how the policy and business environment is changing in the post-COVID era. And I think one of the interesting things is to look forward post-COVID to see how things appear and where big opportunities emerge for any enabling transformative technology. And there are two things in particular that we have coming along coincidentally. We have a new innovation strategy from the government recently published, which focuses on transformative technologies and how we can build on the fact that the UK is great at science and to turn that more into economic advantage. And at the same time, we have this huge new focus on meeting net zero targets and sustainability. And one of the things that has happened over the last 2 years is we have seen sustainability and green issues go from perhaps a peripheral concern to a mainstream issue. And we're increasingly seeing companies appoint people on the board of directors to have a sustainability remit and to look very hard at their sustainability strategies and what they are doing on the technology front to move those to the fore. And that has a big impact on opportunities around acoustics and any enabling technology.
Eleanor Guthrie, Principal Acoustic Engineer at ACOM, has been looking into how to design buildings that sound good. How do we do this, Eleanor?
This is the Royal College of Surgeons headquarters buildings, which is located in Lincoln's Inn Field in London. It's central London, so quite a busy external environment. And one of the considerations we needed to think about was how we controlled that noise from getting into the building. The main atrium connects all the floors together and is a lovely light and airy space, but it's made up of a lot of hard finishes, which acoustically means the sound bounces around, and it means it becomes very echoey. How do we start to find out where these reflection paths are? And that's where we use tools like 3D modelling, and that allowed us to simulate sound travelling within the space, and we could work out where to treat finishes. So the finishes that we have here, on every floor level, the ceiling is actually treated with an acoustic ceiling product. And on the walls, we also have a timber hit and miss system, which again acts to help absorb some of that sound. So in the library, the adjacent space was proposed to become a video conferencing space. So we had to think really carefully about how we could acoustically separate the two areas. So the solution that we came up with was a high-performance glazed door set. For a building this size, it needs a lot of equipment to keep it running. So we've had to design a lot of acoustic features in and select low noise models in order to meet plant noise emission limits. And all of that goes into quite detailed calculations to make sure that we don't upset the neighbours.
Here is the latest news from the world of acoustics in Sound Flash. Lovell Partnership wants to build 157 homes, including 36 for social rent and 11 for shared ownership at Novas Hill, Bristol, and is due to submit a full planning application shortly. The report stated that homes within the blocks and some others overlooking roads will require closed windows and alternative ventilation, for example with the use of trickle ventilators, to achieve acceptable internal noise levels. The blocks of flats will act as a noise buffer for the rest of the development. Campaigners have fiercely opposed these plans. The Institute of Workplace and Facilities Management asked 2,000 adults who had worked from home during the COVID crisis about their experiences. Many reported that their offices were too loud and that they were struggling to cope. The result is a call for employers to improve working environments. There is no known cure for tinnitus, but recent research suggests that hearing aids can be used to alleviate the symptoms by improving overall hearing, masking irritating sounds with white noise and retraining the brain to ignore tinnitus sounds. Neville Holt Opera has announced the use of a virtual acoustic shell for staging this season's outdoor performances. The secret lies in Soundscape's capability to send the sound emanating from the singers' mouths to the audience's ears in an immersive experience that simulates the acoustics found in some of the world's top opera houses and venues. Through the use of software called N-Space, D&B's Soundscape recreates acoustic signatures of prestigious classical music venues around the world without the need for any cumbersome structures or chambers on stage to achieve this. That's it from the second edition of Sound Flash and brings us to the end of the second episode of the IOA Video Bulletin. Looking forward to sounding out some more exciting stories in the next episode, but until then, keep quiet and carry on.